Hi everyone. A few years ago, I had a great breakthrough in my life. It won't sound like much though when I tell you. What happened was, I was walking along the pavement, approaching a pedestrian crossing, and I said out loud, "It's over." I've no idea what the strangers around me thought, hearing me say out loud in the street, "It's over." Perhaps they wondered, who is that man talking to? Or how sad to be a middle-aged man who talks to himself out loud. But I was so happy. I was on cloud nine. I was feeling waves of relief. It was the end of a long struggle. In that moment, I knew without a shadow of a doubt that I had reached a place of total forgiveness. Sadly, in the time leading up to that day, I had found out to my great cost that until you've totally forgiven the person who hurt you, you're the one in prison. And I can tell you, having been on both sides of the prison wall, the freedom is better. The bitterness isn't worth it. Before that great day, when I said, "It's over," there had been some horrible false dawns. I remember one summer when I thought I cracked it. I thought I was there. I thought I had reached total forgiveness. It was a holiday in a beautiful apartment that somebody else had paid for, a free holiday. The sun was shining. Everybody seemed pleased with me. My family was peachy. I had a job that I loved. And I thought that I had totally forgiven the person who'd hurt me. But I knew there was something wrong. I should be feeling elated. I should be feeling carefree. But there was something up. There was still some resentment in my heart. I was still holding on to a grudge. I did have an inkling of where I'd gone wrong. I got out of the bath and read Genesis 45, verse 5. And there it was. That's what I hadn't done. That's what Joseph did. That's what I've got to do. So what is the verse that changed my life? Well, we'll read it in a few minutes. But if you're just joining us, this is week 11 of our series, and you have so joined us at the right time, because this is the climax of a long drama. This is the moment that we have been waiting for. For 22 years, Joseph has been in Egypt, and for 22 years, his brothers have been in Canaan, telling lies about what they really did to Joseph. For the past 10 weeks, we've been following the twists and turns of Joseph's life in exile. Of course, we've known all along that he's still alive, but we've been waiting for Joseph to finally make himself known to his brothers. We've been waiting for the showdown, the denouement. Finally, it happens. Then Joseph could no longer control himself before all his attendants, and he cried out, "Make everyone leave my presence." So there was no one with Joseph when he made himself known to his brothers. And he wept so loudly that the Egyptians heard him, and Pharaoh's household heard about it. Joseph said to his brothers, "I am Joseph." I am Joseph. He didn't break the silence in the Egyptian language. He spoke Hebrew, the language of Canaan. I am Joseph. Can you imagine the impact of those words? 11 throats gulped. 22 eyes widened to the size of saucers. The last time they saw him, he was a pale-faced, frightened youth who'd been tied up and led off to Egypt. The brothers had counted their money and washed their hands of the boy. Joseph was a teenager then. He's a prince now? I am Joseph. Is my father still living? But his brothers were not able to answer him because they were terrified at his presence. They were terrified because Joseph had every reason to wreak his revenge on them. They were terrified because Joseph had the authority to kill them. They were terrified because Joseph had just revealed the best kept secret in Canaan. None of the brothers had ever told anyone what they really did to Joseph. We can be sure of that because Jacob was still in the dark. The report that was still playing in Canaan was, oh, no one knows what really happened to poor old Joseph. I mean, he must have been attacked and killed by a wild animal or something. Whereas the brothers knew they had trafficked Joseph into slavery. That terrible secret was now out. And that's another reason why they were terrified. In the same way, if I met God, I might be terrified that all my secrets would come out. I mean, if God is really God, then he would know all my innermost thoughts and how selfish I've been and how shabbily I've treated him. But what if on that day, as you and I stand before a holy God, you and I receive not punishment, but mercy? Then Joseph said to his brothers, "Come close to me." When they'd done so, he said, "I am your brother Joseph, the one you sold into Egypt. And now do not be distressed, do not be angry with yourselves for selling me here. Instead of, get out of my sight." What if on that judgment day you're told, "Come close to me"? What if instead of, "I am your judge, I am your enemy," what if you hear, "I'm your brother"? One of the reasons why the story of Joseph gets so much space in the book of Genesis is because Joseph prepares us for Jesus. On Judgment Day, instead of, "Get out of my sight," you will hear, "Come close to me." Instead of, "I am your enemy," Jesus will say to you, "I'm your brother." We'll get into this later. But I did promise to tell you about the verse on that holiday that showed me where I'd been going wrong. You see, I thought that I had totally forgiven the person who'd hurt me, but when I read Joseph's words in verse 5, I realized, I had failed. In verse 5, Joseph says to his brothers, "Do not be distressed and do not be angry with yourselves." Those words showed me the difference between Joseph's total forgiveness and my 85% forgiveness. What was lacking? The problem was that I still wanted that person to feel bad about what they'd done. I'd been internally celebrating that at last my conscience was clear. But hey, I mean, if they feel distressed and angry with themselves, well, that's hardly surprising. I wanted them to have a good long think about the error of their ways. My attitude was, I reckon you should be distressed and angry with yourself. But Joseph says to his brothers, "Do not be distressed and do not be angry with yourselves." Joseph's superb attitude again points us to Jesus. Let's think about what Jesus wanted to do and what Joseph wanted to do. At this moment, standing before the brothers who'd wronged him, Joseph had a twofold task: to reveal his true identity and to reveal the fact that total forgiveness is available. Jesus Christ came to earth with the same twofold task: to reveal his true identity and to reveal the fact that total forgiveness is available. A few years ago, I began to use a new visual aid. It was my attempt to try and bring home the reality of this. The idea was that you write down the name of the person who hurt you on a Post-it note and then bring any unforgiveness to the cross. Then you leave it at the cross and walk away free. When Jesus died on the cross, he was carrying, absorbing all of our sins, including my sin of unforgiveness. On the cross, Jesus takes my unforgiveness and your unforgiveness, and you walk away free. Actually, no one enjoys carrying a grudge. No one enjoys walking around feeling bitter and resentful and vengeful. The invitation was to write down the name of the person who hurt you, go to the cross, leave your unforgiveness there, and walk away free. For the brothers, the offer of free forgiveness sounded incredible, too much to grasp. To think that Joseph, the one that we sinned against, the one we sold into slavery, who we left for dead, that he's totally forgiven us, is unbelievable. It's too good to be true. It can't be true. Let's just choose one of the brothers. Let's think about Judah, for example. Judah could say, but Joseph, it was my idea. It was my idea to sell you into slavery. I sold you, Joseph. I pocketed the money. I sold my own brother into slavery. Joseph replies, Judah, listen, you're totally forgiven. What? Unbelievable. No way. This can't be real. I love what happens next, because things get even better for the brothers. Joseph says, and now do not be distressed. Do not be angry with yourselves for selling me here, because it was to save lives. But God sent me ahead of you. For 2 years now, there has been famine in the land, and for the next 5 years, there'll be no plowing and reaping. But God sent me ahead of you to preserve for you a remnant on earth and to save your lives by a great deliverance. So then, it wasn't you who sent me here, but God. This is huge. Joseph says to his brothers, you didn't do it, God did it. It wasn't you that sold me into slavery. It was God. God did it, not you. What? What if during the preceding chapters, in the brothers' darkest moments, when they were still coming to terms with the reality of the evil thing that they'd done, what if you had walked up to those brothers and said, hi guys, got 3 bits of news that I think will surprise you. Number 1, Joseph's still alive. Number 2, he totally forgives you. And number 3, the terrible things that you did to him were all part of God's plan all along. Well, that would have sounded like the best news ever. That's how I felt. That's how I felt when I first understood what Christianity was saying. When I found out that, number 1, Jesus is alive. That number 2, I can be totally forgiven. And number 3, that the terrible things that I'd done somehow were all part of God's plan to bring me to the point of surrender. Wow. It was the best news ever. This is what Christianity is. It's a wow. What Jesus gives you, what Jesus gives me, is more than we could ever dreamed of. Okay. So I've mentioned the phrase total forgiveness several times already. What is total forgiveness? In this chapter, we've already seen at least 3 facets of total forgiveness. So let's just review them so that we can see what we are talking about. Here we go. Number 1. Joseph did not want the Egyptians to know what his brothers had done to him. That's total forgiveness. Do you remember verse 1? He cried out, make everyone leave my presence. So there was no one with Joseph when he made himself known to his brothers. At the start of this chapter, the very first thing that happened was that Joseph ordered everyone, except his brothers, to leave the room. Bewildered Egyptians, civil servants, even his interpreter began filing out. Joseph waited for the last Egyptian to leave the room. Joseph waited for the door to be clearly shut. By contrast, until I arrive at total forgiveness, I want people to know how much I was hurt. I want people to know how unfair it was. I want everyone to hear who was at fault, who was to blame, and where the guilt lies. That is an unforgiving attitude. But Joseph moves way beyond that. Maybe he did once feel like that years ago when he was in prison, but not now. Everybody out! Joseph shouts loudly in Egyptian. Look, there are some sins, some crimes that need to be reported to the police. You and I should never keep that stuff to ourselves. But what about all the other stuff? The bitterness, the grudges, the resentment. Are you still drinking that in? Unforgiveness is like you drinking poison, hoping your enemy will die. Unforgiveness can make you ill. Unforgiveness will leave you feeling very sad until you stop drinking the poison. Joseph stopped drinking the poison. Joseph got free. Number 2, Joseph didn't want his brothers to feel distressed or angry with themselves. That is total forgiveness. Once I'd finally done this, what a relief it was. I don't ever want to go back to the bitterness. So we've already talked a lot, haven't we, about verse 5. Okay, thirdly and finally, Joseph found a way for his brothers to forgive themselves. That is total forgiveness. During the previous chapters, the brothers had come to feel terrible about what they'd done. Some of them felt so guilty, they wanted to die. The third example of total forgiveness in this chapter is that Joseph found a way for the brothers to forgive themselves. How? Joseph brought God into the conversation. Joseph deliberately showed his brothers the big picture. If you want to release someone who's wronged you, if you want to take the pressure off them, if you want to give them air to breathe, start talking about the sovereignty of God. Joseph says, so then, it was not you who sent me here, but God. Hey, no one is suggesting this is easy. Joseph found a way to let his brothers breathe. Joseph found a way to take the pressure off his guilt-ridden brothers. Joseph says to his brothers, you didn't do it, God did it. It wasn't you that sent me here, God did. There are loads of people here in Egypt who would have starved to death, but they haven't. Through me being here, hoarding grain, lives really have been saved. God knew the famine was coming, and God told me about it, and God put me in a position to prevent mass starvation. Look out the window. These people are still alive. Look, you can see them walking around. They're not dead. They're alive. So don't feel bad about yourselves, because it was through you sending me to Egypt that all these people's lives have been saved. Today, Christine Kane is saving lives. She is a 54-year-old Australian who runs a major international movement called A21, which is at the forefront of fighting human trafficking. She stops people dying by combating modern-day slavery. So what's her story? Well, first, let me warn you that if her life were a film, it would be an 18 certificate. Okay, having given that warning, here goes. Christine grew up as a Greek immigrant in Sydney in social housing. 2 weeks before her 33rd birthday, she found out accidentally, through a phone call actually, that she had been adopted. She goes round to her mum's house and asks, "Are you my biological mother?" Answer, "No." Was Dad, he died a few years before, was Dad my biological dad? Answer, "No." We never thought you'd find out. That was a big thing to stumble upon unexpectedly at the age of 32. So Christine began the task of trying to find her biological parents, and when she tracked down the official record of her birth, the truth was she was born to a Greek mother named Panagoita. But in the box where it said father's name, someone had written the word unknown. She read on. In the box marked child's name, it said unnamed. Father unknown, child unnamed. She was simply birth number 2508 in the year 1966. But that is not the worst part of her story. You see, I skipped over her childhood. The fact is that from the age of 3 to the age of 15, she was sexually abused by a group of men. Unwanted, unnamed, unknown. Okay, so far, this is a very sad story, I'm sure you'd agree. But hang on, how come if all these terrible things happened to her, how come that today she's this famous, high-profile, international justice warrior? Well, the answer to that is that when she was 22, a friend invited her to a church in Sydney, and as soon as she walked in, she realized, this is what I've been wanting all my life. She became a Christian and volunteered to serve in the church by cleaning up after the service. At her church, as a new Christian, she swept the floors and she volunteered to clean the toilets. And from the age of 22, she began to study the Bible. And she found out who she was in Christ. And that became such a solid foundation in her life that when she found out she was adopted, it actually didn't completely devastate her because she already knew who her heavenly Father was. She started to preach in her church and then all around the world. And when she heard of the plight of girls trapped in the sex trade, she knew how to respond. When she saw their faces on missing person posters and heard of the abuse they'd suffered at the hands of their captors, this unnamed and abused child, number 2508, set out to rescue those nameless and abused girls. Her A21 mission has offices around the world. They combat human trafficking, establish prevention programs in schools, represent victims as legal advocates, and give them refuge in safe houses. Okay, that's all very inspiring, so what? And what has it got to do with Genesis chapter 45? Well, I've heard Christine Kane say what Joseph said. I've heard her say to her father, whoever he is, because it might have been a one-night stand, it might have been an adulterous affair, she's got no idea, say to the man who didn't want her and didn't name her, what you did was wrong, but God did it. What you did was wrong, but God did it. She says, I don't know why all these things happen to me. All I do know is that as a result of what I went through, I feel for these unwanted, nameless girls who get trafficked into slavery. As a result of what I went through, I feel massively motivated and empowered by God to set them free. Hey, look, I'm not asking you to agree with her analysis. I'm just reporting what she says. It's what Joseph said to his brothers. It was wrong, but God did it. That is mind-boggling. Christine Kane is free, living free. And Joseph is free too. If I'd been there that day, talking to Simeon and Levi and Judah and the rest, I would have told them, you'll get through this, not because you are strong, but because your brother is. Not because you are good, but because your brother is. Their brother was Joseph. Your brother is Jesus. Unlike Moses and Elijah, Joseph did no miracles. What makes Joseph great is the fact that he forgave his brothers and his magnificent attitude towards personal setbacks. Anyone who's ever spent a day at work will know that the most important thing at work is your attitude. Anyone who has a positive attitude is gold. They lift everyone else. They literally change the atmosphere. Somebody said that if you can't summarize a sermon in one sentence, it's not worth preaching. So here we go. I'll finish with this. Genesis chapter 45 shows us that greatness is revealed mainly in your attitude. Drew's going to come in a moment and gather all these threads together. But now let's turn to worship. I'm going to hand back to Dave. Dave, please lead us.